Welcome back to Tranquility du Jour, nourishing conversations about living a full and meaningful life with doses of tranquility. This is episode 576. I'm your host, Kimberly Wilson, bringing you tranquility through this medium since 2005. Today, I wanted to give a bit more of a life lately update, simply because I've gotten a lot more questions from you. And I also just wanted to tie it into everything that's going on in the world right now, which is quite heartbreaking and overwhelming, and also give you some journal prompts and some things to think about as it relates to this whole theme around life lately. So I look forward to sharing this week's podcast with you, and I hope that you will grab pen and paper. There's also a downloadable worksheet that can be found at kimberlywilson.com/576. And I encourage you to take notes as we follow along, and also to have time and space to sit with the journaling questions that I'm going to give you at the end of this podcast. All right, so first off, what I'm going to talk about today is a little update on some things that I'm reading that I think you too may find interesting or enticing. A little sneak peek on what's going on inside the Coterie, which is my annual program. And, just to let you know, if you're not in it, what we're doing and some of the exciting things that are happening. And, really where a lot of my attention and time is going right now. Why I'm obsessed with the Goodreads Reading Challenge. So I got a really great question from a listener earlier this year that was like, I don't understand. Why do you do that? I like to read for pleasure. And I feel like if I was tracking it, it would cause more stress. And I really liked her question because it shows how different we all operate. And just to give a little bit of insight into the why. What I'm working on in ballet, which was a question that came up recently, and I have a lot to say there. I actually just got back from taking a bus from DC to New York in one day for a 3-hour lesson with my private teacher, who I just adore, and then came back that night. So it was like, how many hours in the bus was I? 9 for a 3-hour workshop? I mean, it wasn't even a workshop, right? It's a private lesson. And I'll talk a bit more about that and the why. And then I've gotten a few questions about my favorite tea spots in DC. So I thought I would just share a couple of those because some of the Coterie ladies will be descending on Washington, DC for our DC Fete that's happening in May, which is, just really an afternoon tea party at Chez Moi. So I always like to share some of my favorite tea spots in DC, in case you may be traveling to the DC area. And then also, as I mentioned, I'm going to be giving some journal prompts to assist with your reflection around this idea of life lately. All right, so let's dive in with a little bit on what am I reading lately? So what I've read since my last Life Lately share is The Paris Bookseller, which is really lovely and was all about Shakespeare and Company in Paris and Sylvia Beach and her whole backstory, which I didn't know. So it was really, really good. The Self-Love Experiment by Shannon Kaiser, and enjoyed that. My Part-Time Paris Life by Lisa Anselmo, and that was really enjoyable. Just a fun, gentle, easy read. And when I say easy, similar to The Paris Bookseller, it's a story that you get lost in, and those are so great because I tend to really focus on so many, self-development type books. And so it was one of those where it was just like nice to actually just enjoy a book and kind of get lost in someone else's experience. Now, the book that I am reading right now that I cannot recommend more highly is called Personality Isn't Permanent. Okay, and I'm about 55, 60% through the book. But it's really hit me in so many ways. I mean, one thing that the author talks about is that personality tests are basically like the horoscope, which I just found so interesting because I'm very much like, I am an INFJ, I am an HSP. And, all these things really do help make up my identity and how I feel about myself. And yet it was also interesting for him to be like, personality isn't permanent, right? Who we are at a certain stage of our life is not who we are becoming. And he gives lots and lots of data. He's a psychologist and he quotes, and gives lots of ideas on studies and things along those lines. But the piece that I really wanted to share with you that stuck out to me is this idea around our future self. Now, I offer a lot of exercises around our future self in workshops and virtual retreats, things along those lines, right? Where we'll do affirmative writing and picture yourself a year from today or 6 months from today or whatever. And, you're living your best life. What are you doing? What are you wearing? Where are you living? Who are you with? Where we really get quite specific. And so I love the exercise, and yet he really takes it to a whole nother level that I want to mention. So he explores in the particular myth, around personality not being permanent. And he asks this great question. He says, how much time do you spend imagining your future self? For most people, the answer is not very much. In the present, we always feel like ourselves, quote unquote, despite the fact that our consistent emotions and behaviors, even our habits and environment, are entirely different from what they were years ago. It's time to start thinking about who your future self is going to be. You don't want to be surprised, disappointed, or frustrated by where you're at and who you become. You don't want to leave your future self hanging due to neglect, bad planning, or poor decisions on the part of your present self. It's best to make decisions based on what your future, not your present self, wants. It's best to decide and act from the vantage point of your desired circumstances, not your present ones. Which I just love this. He goes on to say who you want to be in the future is more important than who you are now and should actually inform who you are now. Your intended future self should direct your current identity and personality far more than your former self does, right? So basing our personality on, our vision of who we are from our former self, he's like, don't do that. Really focus on your future self. And he talks about this a lot, as the book goes on. And there's one thing that really stuck with me that I read last week that I wanted to share with you. As the British philosopher Elaine Day Botton said, anyone who isn't embarrassed by who they were 12 months ago isn't learning enough. Oh my gosh, again, that really stuck with me, right? So if we continue to be the same people that we were 1 year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, this book is really encouraging us to not think of ourselves as who we are now, but who our future self is, and to continue to make decisions and set goals aligned with that. Anyway, I have to say this book has just blown my mind wide open on so many things. And I've actually been sharing quite a bit of it with clients. And, one thing that's interesting too is, so many people are searching for their passion, right? Like, I don't know if this is what I'm meant to do, blah, 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 right? And it can become so frustrating and people can feel so stuck. And one of the things he says is passion follows action. So the importance is that you start doing things and then passion will develop versus the other way around. And again, I just found that really helpful and powerful for people who are like, oh, I have to figure out what my passion is. I don't like what I'm doing, which is, I get it. So important. And yet, rather than staying in kind of the safe thing of what we're doing that we don't really enjoy or isn't us anymore, what would happen if you actually took some action in a direction to see if that's where your passion may lie? Again, I just was really, this book is, I'm sipping it like a fine wine, kind of like I did the book Transitions years ago, and think you too may enjoy it. So definitely check it out. Personality Isn't Permanent. Okay, so what's going on in the Coterie? So the Coterie, as some of you may know, it's something that I offer in December, and then we launch in January. This year we actually launched on New Year's Eve, which was so fun. And basically every month we have a new theme. So January was dreams, February was love, this month is style and beauty. So we have a workshop around them, we have monthly co-creating time, and then we also have this wonderful online forum. And I also offer a variety of bonuses. And the two that have happened so far is this whole piece with Britt Bravo, who's been on the podcast before, about really trying to get in touch with your big vision. And what was so fun is by the end, we took our big vision, kind of thinking of this future self, and narrowed it down to 3 action steps. And I wrote those out, and all 3 of them, 1 has already been done, and then the other 2 will happen this month or in the next 6 weeks. So it was just so fun to be like, I am like working in that direction, like I'm feeling good about it. So anyway, that was a really fun event. And then just this past weekend, we collaged a love letter to ourselves with Christine Mason Miller, who has also been on the podcast. Both of these ladies are just absolute gems and people that I've known in the online world since like the mid 2000s, which is just craziness. And so that's really fun. And then we also have a class coming up, a private 101 ballet class with my teacher. That's happening in April. So we've got these workshops, we've got these bonus events, we've got this co-creating time where we get together and we work on a project that is meaningful to us. And then we also have events. We've got these virtual retreats. The next one is happening April 9th, and you are invited to that. That is the only thing really that's Coterie specific that is open to the public. And then, of course, in May, we're going to have this DC Fête, right? Which is just this afternoon tea party chez moi. So excited about that. So that's just a little taste. The other thing is we have like 100+ page workbook that really takes us through the whole year together. And the group is amazing. So devoted and beautiful. And I'm so grateful to be able to host this experience. And you can sign up for the wait list for this over at kimberlywilson.com/coterie for anyone who missed us this year and would like to join in 2023, which I cannot believe I'm even saying the phrase 2023. All right, so why am I obsessed with the Goodreads Reading Challenge? So I have been doing this for quite a few years now, 5, 6, 7. And I believe most years I have made it, except for last year. And last year, losing Belle Starr unexpectedly, so suddenly. Anyone who's experienced grief, you know this. You cannot focus, right? Like you cannot, at least I couldn't, sit down to read. I mean, I was like numb. I was hollow. I was really not doing well for 8 weeks. And so during that time, I couldn't read. I couldn't focus on anything other than, getting through my days. And so I jokingly blame Belle Starr for not meeting my Goodreads goal. But, the piece about it is that I find really helpful is I get excited to go in and add the book whenever I'm done. And I love to see, you're on target. You're 2 books behind. You're 2 books above, your reading goal. And for some reason, this is really important to me because I love to buy books. I love to be surrounded by books. I love to have many books in my reading queue. And without this sort of a goal, I probably wouldn't finish books. I go on to the next shiny red apple. And, yes, you can read multiple books at a time. I did it for years, but now I'm much more about reading one book, really focusing on it and completing it, then marking it in the challenge. So to me, the challenge is motivating. And so I totally understand from the listener who was like, why do you do that? Like that would stress me out and take away the pleasure. And if that's the case, then yes, a reading challenge is not for you. For me, it really does just help me stay on track. Now, anyone who's interested, in the show notes, you'll find a link to my Goodreads Reading Challenge page. And it gives you an idea what I've read, what my goal is. And, you can find if you would like to set your own reading challenge. And of course, no pressure. I just wanted to give a little bit of ideas on the why. And in case you suffer from my disease of buying books and reading multiple ones at a time in the past, and you would like to be more focused, this might be helpful for you. Only if it's inspiring and motivating. Okay, so not if you find it punitive. What I'm working on ballet. Okay, can I just tell you what am I not working on in ballet? I have been back to ballet as an adult consistently since January 2018, right? So we are 4 years plus in. And can I just tell you how hard it is and how humbling it is and how it is 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, like constantly. I actually, during a private session, I have, I tend to take classes every day, online virtual classes through a variety of resources. And then I have 2 private teachers I work with. One who is my teacher who I just love. And I've been working with him since I started taking his classes during the pandemic through Ballet Academy East in New York City. And his name is Sean Kelly. Love him. He just is the sweetest soul. And then I also have a private session that I just started with Vanessa Woods of Vitality Ballet. She's just absolutely so lovely. And we started working on Point in December while Sean was in Australia, helping with the production of An American in Paris and not doing private sessions. And so I started with Vanessa, and I'm keeping with her because I really, really like her energy too. And again, we focus on Point. Okay, so what am I working on? So June 30th, which happens to be my 49th birthday, Broche Ballet is doing and hosting this adult ballet festival in Miami. And that Friday, so it's like a week-long thing, but that Friday of my birthday is, or maybe Thursday, I can't remember, it's June 30th, is Performance Day. And, what's funny is, as a child, you practice for your big annual recital. And there is something kind of like the Goodreads challenge that's quite motivating about that. And so as soon as I found out about this, the day it was open to the public, I signed up. And that must have been last fall. So Sean and I began working on choreography. Well, okay, he created the choreography to Lilac Fairy from Sleeping Beauty and created this really lovely routine. It's 2 minutes and 45 seconds, I think that's as long as it can be for this festival. And we've been working on it. And that's what I actually went up to New York to do last week because, I've been practicing it in like very small space since October. And he recorded it. It was so helpful to see, okay, I've got a ton of polishing to do. The good news is I pretty much have the choreography down. Okay, but what am I working on? Getting that down, getting it into my body, feeling more confident with my movements. Pirouettes will be the death of me. I mean, they are so hard. And those of you who don't know, pirouettes are turns, right? And I'm still just struggling to get my single turn, like focused, spotting, upright, not like wobbling like a weeble wobble, which is usually what I feel like with pirouettes. And no matter how many I try, and what's crazy, the more I do in a practice in a class, the worse I get as the class goes. I'm like, could ballet be any harder? Oh my gosh. Anyway, so that's what I'm working on in ballet, and I'll definitely be sure to share all about the the performance and, have Tim video it. I'm so excited. And he even sent it to me because I sent him the video from my practice up with Sean in New York last week. And I'm like, I got some work to do. And he's like, it looks pretty good to me. And he said, I have to say, though, I'm proud of you because, it's not easy to take something like this on when you could really kind of embarrass yourself. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting way to look at it. But, I think for me, just the idea is, it's so fun to practice, right? It's so fun. I love the classes, but there is something about performing and really working towards something that is motivating to me. And so that's kind of why I'm doing this. And I got a taste of it back in pre-pandemic. So it must have been 2019. And there was this ballet boot camp at Washington Ballet. And we, in 2 days, learned a routine to Don Quixote. Again, it was probably a minute and a half, like very short. You can actually find it. I put it up over on YouTube, my YouTube channel. And that was just so fun, to learn something, few hours and 2 days, and then perform it. It just I really enjoyed it. And so that's kind of what I'm working on and the motivation behind it. Again, I know I'm not going to be dancing for some ballet company. I'm just trying to stay upright in a pirouette. But, there's something that is just really helpful for me. Mentally, it's so hard, right? With the choreography, to remember it, that's not a strong suit of mine. Even in classes, when the teacher demos, and then it's your turn to go and do it, usually they're still showing it in some capacity, but still for me to remember those. And when your foot's going quickly in these different directions, it's it's so patting your belly and rubbing your head sort of experience. So a very good challenge for me. And then finally, my favorite T-spots in DC. Now, those of you who are coming to DC for any reason, for the DC Fete that I'm hosting for the Coterie, or for your own pleasure, or if you live in DC. So my go-to on a regular basis is right next door to my office in Washington, DC, and it's called Emissary Cafe. Great local cafe. I love their matcha lattes. And I also love that they serve teaism teas, which is my other favorite spot, which is also right around the corner in DuPont Circle. They have a few locations, but they've been around forever. And believe it or not, the co-owner used to take yoga classes through Tranquil Space when we were in the church space back in freaking 2000, right? And so it's just so sweet to have watched her growth and development with beautiful teaism. Okay, so that's another favorite spot. And the third spot that comes to mind that I just really appreciate, just it's the aesthetic, right? And it feels like you're transported to Paris, is La Durée. And that is in Georgetown. It's also in Paris. It's also in New York. It's also in Beverly Hills, and it's vegan in Beverly Hills. So anyway, you can get La Durée in many, many, many places. And what I love there is they have this amazing rose latte that has rose petals on top, and you can get it with non-dairy milk, which I always appreciate. So now just a little taste into my favorite tea spots in DC. And I'm curious for listeners, what are your favorite tea spots? Anything that I may be missing that is a must go to, I would love to know, or even in your own favorite city. All right, so now I want to leave you with some prompts, some things to think about that might relate to these answers that I've given based on your questions. And I also want to thank you for sending these in. Please feel free to send those in to me. You can respond when I ask for suggestions over on Instagram. I'm Instagram at Tranquility du Jour, or just drop me a note, hello@KimberlyWilson.com, and let me know what you're curious about. Let me know how I can support you and what I might be able to answer for you in one of these Life Lately Ask Me Anything sort of episodes. All right, so question number 1, and again, you can download this worksheet, KimberlyWilson.com/576. All right, so How will I celebrate Women's History Month? Happy Women's History Month to you. And I'm going to have a link in the show notes to yourdream.liveyourdream.org that has 15 ways to celebrate Women's History Month. And so I'm going to share a few of these with you. Explore the history of women's rights. So interesting, having done a master's degree in women's studies. Now I think it's gender studies everywhere. I don't even know if it's still called women's studies. But, and it's funny that I even mentioned this because I woke up this morning thinking about it and how life-changing taking an intro to women's studies course my senior year of college, how it really shifted me as a thinker and as an individual and my direction in life. So there is a lot to learning about women's history. Being aware of the issues that women still faced. This website that I just mentioned has a feminist activist toolkit that you can download. Support a women's nonprofit. Okay, there are so many amazing ones out there. Host an event to celebrate women, support women-owned businesses, and write a thank you note to a woman that inspires you. Write yourself a love note and watch TED Talks for women. Okay, so again, I'm going to put a link to this article over in the show notes and let me know which of these are you inspired to do, and maybe we can even join you. Number 2, how am I taking care of myself during this heartbreaking time? Every time I go to the news, it just seems to be devolving, right? I mean, one good thing is we're on the tail end, it seems like, of COVID, right? Mask mandates, so many things are being removed. I think we're feeling a bit more normal again, and then this happens, right? So the thing that's going on in Ukraine, the war, is heartbreaking. And it's really having an effect on people. I'm hearing the phrase existential dread regularly. So I just wanted to share some ideas that might be helpful as you think about how to take care of yourself during this heartbreaking time. And I also want you to think about, how are you doing it? How can you do more of it? Okay, so really thinking about, how do we control the controllables? And this was big 2 years ago at the start of the pandemic, and I want to emphasize it now too. So movement, of course, like these basic things, getting out, moving your body. Vitamin D, soaking up some sunshine. You guys, it was like 75 degrees here yesterday. Sleep, I'm noticing my sleep is a bit disturbed. I'm wondering if yours is. Reduce that screen time. And this is all, I think, relatable to 2 years ago at the start of the pandemic, when everything was so jarring and shocking, and really throughout the pandemic. But making sure that you're reducing that screen time and not going constantly to refresh, right? Because that definitely takes a toll. Your basic needs of staying hydrated, drink that water. Meditating, so getting and being still. Right? Just taking those big, deep breaths and pausing. And mentioning that big, deep breath work, so important. Practicing loving kindness. I've put a meditation, an MP3 up for you over on the blog, so be sure to check that out. And there's also a link to it in the show notes. And then, of course, eating well, right? So stay away as much as possible from the processed kind of junk, right? I know it's good. It's comforting. Enjoy, right, as needed. But also just notice what effect it's having on your nervous system, and do what you can to really take good care of that nervous system, because it's activated right now and it needs your help. Number 3, how can I spread compassion? All right, so over again in that blog post that I mentioned about compassion, I've got a link to, and there are many, many resources out there, but a link to, one list that has, everything from, providing various aid to helping, of course, the humans, to helping the animals, right? So there's many, many different listicles, that are out there to help you know kind of what is it that you can do to also offer a sense of empowerment. One thing I have done is I follow Global. They have connections with 2 of the animal shelters over in Ukraine. And I guess 2 main ones in a specific city, I believe. And anyway, so donated to them, right? And I know the zoo, there was an article in the Washington Post about the zoo and everything that's going on in Kyiv and how it's affecting the animals, and the elephants really stressed, and the zookeeper, one of the zookeepers or helpers, is sleeping with the elephant at night to help keep it calm. Just all the horrific things on multiple levels that are happening. And so asking yourself, how can I spread compassion? And maybe that's even just at home. Maybe you don't feel like there's much that you can do. There's, protests in Washington, D.C., and I'm sure, around the world. So just thinking about ways in which you can spread compassion. It starts from within, and then it starts in your nuclear world, right? Your family, your community, and then spreads out. And so thinking about what can you do to help. And then finally, ask yourself, what does my life look like lately? Right? So this idea of me just sharing these random things, based on your questions and to give a little insight into life lately. What about you? What would you have on your life lately list? And thinking about the book that I shared, Personality Isn't Permanent, how can this help inform your future self? All right, so what are some choices that you could be making now as you think about life lately that will help move you in the direction of your future self? And again, this quote really stuck with me. If you're not embarrassed by who you were a year ago, you're not growing or you're not learning. Just really stuck with me. So thinking about this, I hope that these questions are helpful. I hope that, my updates, even though they're specific to me, that they also spread a little bit of inspiration your way, I hope, and also gives you a little bit of insight into what's going on in my world. But that in turn helps you think a little bit about yours, right? So how often do we allow ourselves to push the pause button and really kind of do some thinking, doing some reflection, and doing some thinking about what we want more of? And again, we'll be doing that on April 9th at the virtual retreat, which will really be a pretty big focus too on spring cleaning. So spring cleaning our life, right? So I would love to have you join us. And there's a link in the show notes, or you can also head over to KimberlyWilson.com/virtual retreat. And then just scheduled May 1st is our TDJ Style Spring Pop-Up Workshop. So this is basically a 1-hour event all about kind of style, capsule wardrobe, kind of beauty in every day. And would love to have you join for that. That is a free event. And again, there's a link in the show notes. So finally, if you're not signed up for my love notes, please be sure to do so. I try to send them quite regularly, filled with links and inspiration and ideas, and also tools. So you can do that through the show notes or at KimberlyWilson.com/love notes. There's also a link to my 6 books. Let me know which one resonates with you. What are you reading now? What are you finding most helpful? Which tranquility tool are you most resonating with? And those of you who have my books, you may know in the day book and then the various more recent books, there's all these tranquility tools that I encourage for reflection on a daily, weekly, monthly, seasonal, and then I've also added annual, and I think only the Coterie got that this year. But anyway, just gives an idea of ways to really be doing this regular reflection. Also, please follow along on Instagram. You can find me at Tranquility du Jour and at Shop Tranquility du Jour. And then, of course, over on YouTube. And finally, share a review if you have a moment to pen a review of this podcast on Apple Podcasts or any of my books on Amazon or Goodreads. I would be so, so grateful. That would mean the world to me. All right, so thank you as always for tuning in. I wish you a delicious week ahead and also a very happy Women's History Month. And thank you for being you, and thank you for being part of my life. Namaste.